You're listening to episode 71 of Liz's Healthy Table.
Looking for a healthy new way to feed your family without the hassle and hype? Welcome to Liz's Healthy Table, where your host, registered dietitian nutritionist Liz Weiss, serves up fresh and flavorful recipes with a tasty side of science, good nutrition, and fun. Are you and your family ready for some wholesome food that tastes great too? Don't change that dial. Your food adventure starts here.
On this week's podcast, I'll be exploring the connection between diet and brain health with my guest, Dr. Annie Fenn. Annie is a physician, a chef, and a culinary instructor. For 20 years, she practiced obstetrics and gynecology with a specialty in menopause. But as you'll hear from Annie herself in just a few short minutes, her career took an interesting turn. Today, she's the founder of the Brain Health Kitchen Cooking School, the only culinary school of its kind in the country, focused exclusively on fending off Alzheimer's and other dementias with brain-healthy foods and cooking techniques. So together on the show, we are going to walk and talk you through the Mind Diet, which features 10 healthy brain food groups, which all of us should be eating each week, and 5 unhealthy brain food groups that we would all be wise to avoid. And we'll be sharing a few recipes, including my riff on Annie's Moroccan forbidden rice salad. Now, if you have never tried forbidden rice, you will definitely want to try it after you hear about this recipe. We'll also talk about Annie's Rustic Marmalade cake made with olive oil versus butter. Now, you can find Annie at brainhealthkitchen.com, and I will be sure to share plenty of links in the show notes over at lizshealthytable.com/podcast. So no reason to grab a pen and paper. Just sit back and enjoy the show. Or better yet, take a walk while you're listening, because exercise, like the Mind Diet, is good for brain health. A friendly reminder, if you love the show, tell a friend about it, post a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to join the Liz's Podcast Posse page over on Facebook, so you will always be the first to know what's happening at Liz's Healthy Table. And of course, over on that page, you can weigh in and share your ideas for topics and guests. Liz's Healthy Table is brought to you by my friends at superhealthykids.com, your one-stop shop for recipes, meal plans, cooking videos, and tips for feeding kids of all ages. And on this week's show, I would like to give my cookbooks and freebies page on the Liz's Healthy Table website a little bit of a shout out. If you stop by my website, you click through to the cookbooks and freebies page, you're going to find all sorts of cool stuff. You will find my free supermarket shopping list. It's an aisle by aisle list, my 7-day meal planner, my Color Cook Eat coloring cookbook series, and so much more. Anyway, check out the website, check out the show notes, and check out this week's podcast, because this topic is going to change your life. Annie Fenn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Liz. It's great to be here.
Finally, you and I went back and forth a couple times. We did. A little drama, head colds and a concussion in the mix, right?
Yes, we did. I think we're both on the road to recovery.
Yeah. Well, you had the concussion and you're from the Brain Health Kitchen. So we might have to talk about that concussion in a minute. And I want to know what did you eat to heal yourself? So hold on to that thought. But before we dig into the show, I just want you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself. You're a mom, you're a doctor, you've got this awesome website, Brain Health Kitchen. You do cooking classes, but just give everybody a little bit of the backstory on who you are and what you do and where you live, because you live in a cool part of the country.
Oh, well, I'll start with that. I live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is a very gorgeous place, also a very cold place. And I've been here for 25 years. I'm actually a mom like you to 2 boys. You have 2 boys. Is that correct?
Do. I say the house of testosterone.
Same here.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest is 21 years old. My youngest is 19. So they're both off at college now and have nice long visits from college breaks. I'm also a board certified obstetrician gynecologist, and I practiced obstetrics for over 20 years, mostly here in Jackson Hole and also in Chicago where I trained. So I decided to retire in 2010. And there are a lot of reasons for that we can talk about later. But I basically wanted to be home with my kids. I didn't want to miss any more soccer matches. And I was really getting pulled into the world of food as medicine rather than using medicine and surgery as medicine, if that makes any sense.
It sure does. Yeah.
So I went back to school one summer when my kids were at summer camp. I just started going off to school again. And this time I went to culinary school, which had been a lifelong dream of mine as an avid cook and food enthusiast ever since I was a teenager. So after culinary school, I just started teaching cooking classes in my community. My only goal really was to help people eat better. I felt like what I had seen in my practice over the decades was that a poor diet really contributes to most of the health problems that I saw in women's health. So I was teaching classes, I was writing about food, and somewhere around 2014 and 2015, I was still reading all my medical journals, mind you, because doctors never stopped doing that. But I kept seeing a lot of the data that pertains to how to prevent Alzheimer's and other types of dementia based on what we eat and how we live our lives, our lifestyle choices. And while I was getting interested in that, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So as you can imagine, I took a deep dive into literature to figure out ways to help my mom, who was diagnosed with the earliest stage called mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. And while I was trying to figure out how we can feed her better and help her out and prevent progression of the disease, I really did have an epiphany that this is what I should be teaching in my cooking classes, and this is what I should be writing about. So I ended up launching the Brain Health Kitchen Cooking School a few years after that. This was 2017. My mission with this school is to teach people how easy and delicious it is to cook and eat the foods that are proven to prevent Alzheimer's.
Wow, that's a huge charge. I mean, your mom gets Alzheimer's, what can I do to help her? And then boom, here you are. And to me, it's a huge topic. Like, how do you even wrap your arms around it? Because I don't know, I eat a healthy diet, I think, right? I hope I'm eating for brain health and other, disease states. But how do you, like, when you say, brain health, like, and diet, where's the connection there?
Well, it's gotten easier because this is a hot area of research. So back when I was practicing OBGYN prior to 2010, I didn't really have a study to hang my hat on to tell people that there's a certain way you should eat to prevent Alzheimer's disease. And I did do a lot of Alzheimer's counseling in my practice. The last 8 years of practice, I focused primarily on menopause and treating perimenopausal patients. So we talked a lot about brain health, but it wasn't really until the last few years that some landmark studies came out. And we can talk about the MIND diet, the MIND diet study that came out in 2015. That's the one that got my attention real quick and started me on this path. There are hundreds of other studies that pertain to the Mediterranean diet and how that associates brain health and brain longevity in populations of people. And then there's a lot of nutrient data looking at whole foods and what's in them. What is the healthy, brain healthy part of these foods that actually are neuroprotective of the brain? My job as a culinary instructor and as a chef now is to create really irresistible recipes that people are going to want to cook because they're easy and because everybody loves the food. But I also want to make them as nutrient dense as possible. And I want as many neuroprotective foods in there as I can possibly imagine.
So we're going to have to unlock the secret to these neuroprotective foods, and we're going to give people some great recipes. I want everyone on the edge of their seat, because before we get into that, I just have to ask you before I forget, because I will forget, where'd you go to culinary school? Because I had Julia Norgren on my show. She's a doctor, and she went to the CIA. She ended up going to the Culinary Institute. And so she's a doctor, but also a chef. So I want to hear a little bit more about that chef training that you got.
Yes, well, that's funny because Julia and I have mutual friends. And so I've heard of her and I follow her on Instagram. I think what she's doing is wonderful. And I also trained at the Culinary Institute of America. I trained at the San Antonio School when it first opened. I believe it was 2012. I spent time doing culinary training in French technique.
A lot of butter.
A lot of butter.
maybe not part of the MIND diet.
Not part of the MIND diet. And it's funny because one of the things that I learned at the CIA in how to make things delicious is the Maillard reaction, which is a chemical reaction where you have a protein and then you apply something sweet to it. So let's say you have a piece of chicken and then you apply barbecue sauce to it and then you put them under high heat So let's say you're searing them on the grill and then they get all brown and crusty and that aroma happens and the grill marks happen that Americans love so much. That's called the Maillard reaction. So when I learned at the CIA how to use this technique to make food delicious, I've learned since then that that Maillard reaction is actually what makes the food so unhealthy for our brains by creating particles called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. And these particles get into our nerve cells and into our nervous system, and they accumulate in the nerve cells of Alzheimer's patients as well. So a lot of what I teach in the cooking school is not just about choosing the right foods, all right, although that's key, but also applying proper cooking techniques to these foods so that we don't create an unhealthy situation.
So all of my barbecue lovers, are they freaking out right now? Hello, what's going on? Are you saying like lay off the barbecue, lay off the backyard grill, or just don't burn the food?
I'm saying maybe we should eat less barbecue than Americans are notorious for.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some tricks on the grill that can help you reduce AGE formation in your grilling. One would be to use a grill basket, because what you want is indirect heat and lower heat in general applied to your food. And that applies to vegetables or chicken or meat or kebabs, whatever you might be grilling. And you want to avoid getting those grill marks on your food, unfortunately. But you can still have really delicious barbecues.
Yeah, but even, you mentioned the grill basket. I'm thinking foil. I love to wrap like cabbage. I was like on a jag this summer where I was grilling green cabbage. I'd add olive oil and salt and pepper and herbs, and I'd wrap it in a packet in foil. So that's good, right?
That's absolutely a great way to do it. And also keep your grill really clean, because that stuff that accumulates on the grill are the things that are also accumulating in the cells of your brain, literally. So you want to keep your grill super clean, use a grill basket, use lower heat than you might. And then if you're cooking meat, I really prefer to cook it in a slow oven than I do over the grill. Another thing you can do if you love barbecue, if you eat something that has a high AGE content, let's say you have a steak and you've grilled it and it's medium rare and it's got grill marks on it. It's just the way my husband likes it. If you eat a huge pile of fresh leafy greens or other fresh vegetables with that, it will really reduce the absorption of the AGEs into your bloodstream.
So hooray for vegetables. You see, they always come out on top, Annie.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we got off on a little tangent, but I'm glad we did because that was really interesting. But I want to hear a little bit more then about this MIND diet. What is the acronym MIND? Like, what does it stand for? What's the MIND diet?
So the MIND diet is a spin-off of the Mediterranean diet. And a lot of people are already familiar with what the Mediterranean diet looks like. There's a pyramid that's very iconic and famous that probably most of your listeners have seen, where the base of the pyramid is primarily fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, other types of legumes, nuts and seeds. And then the second tier is fish and seafood. The third tier is chicken, poultry, cheese, and the very top are meats and sweets. So this Mediterranean diet pyramid has been studied throughout the ages for its ability to contribute to longevity in populations, such as people who live in blue zones, who are famous for living to 100.
And give us those blue zones real quick.
So there's 5 blue zones around the world. One is Sardinia, which is an island off the coast of Italy. The other one is Okinawa, which is an island in Japan. There's an island in Greece called Icaria. There's a peninsula, the Nocaya Peninsula in Costa Rica. That's a blue zone. And there's a blue zone in the United States in Loma Linda, California.
And so people in these blue zones are eating well and they are living longer. And so the MIND diet being sort of Mediterranean, I mean, you mentioned Okinawa, but the MIND diet, which is this sort of Mediterranean diet, tell us a little bit more then about that.
So the MIND diet stands for the Mediterranean-Intervention for Neurodegenerative Decline. And that's a mouthful, right? Mm-hmm. But basically what you need to understand is that it's a hybrid of 2 diets that have done very well in rigorous studies in terms of preventing chronic diseases. The DASH diet you may be familiar with. It is designed to prevent hypertensive disease in people, cardiovascular diseases secondary to high blood pressure. And then, of course, the Mediterranean diet. So the group that published the MIND diet study is at Rush University. The lead researcher is Dr. Martha Clara Morris. And Dr. Morris thought, well, if the Mediterranean diet is so good for longevity, and a lot of these centenarians don't have dementia, what if we made the Mediterranean diet even more specific to the brain. And she did this by using all of the knowledge that she had done in her 20-year career of studying nutrition in the brain, as well as other papers that have been written about certain food groups, such as, what are the best fruits? She chose berries as a food group for the MIND diet. What about nuts and seeds? What about the best cooking oil? And she looked at all of these through the lens of brain health and came up with, basically it's diet, but I think of more of it as a lifestyle guideline, where there are 10 brain healthy food groups and 5 brain unhealthy food groups. And so this diet it's not an elimination diet by any means. It's more of a eat more of this, eat less of that diet, which I think is very sustainable for most people.
Yeah. So give us the 10 foods we should eat for the mind, a healthy mind, and give us those foods we should avoid. And then I want you to just maybe before you give us that list, how much of a reduction are we talking about? Like if you're eating this MIND diet, it doesn't mean you're never going to get Alzheimer's or dementia, but it lowers the risk, right?
Well, this is what's really remarkable about it, Liz, and this is what really got my attention. We don't know really how to treat Alzheimer's, right? And there hasn't been any intervention like a pill or a medicine or even a lifestyle intervention that was proven to reduce the risk significantly. So when the MIND diet participants followed the MIND diet most carefully after 4.5 years, and these are dementia-free, healthy brains, mostly middle-aged people, they reduced their chance of getting Alzheimer's 4.5 years later by 53%.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And that's just in 4.5 years. Imagine if you followed it out through decades of your life. The other thing I really love about this study is that those people that adhered to the dietary guidelines about half the time, because, let's face it, it's hard for people to change and it's hard for them to give up some of the things in the brain unhealthy food groups that we'll talk about. They even had a reduction in their Alzheimer's risk of 37%.
So what are these foods? What should we all be eating more of? And what should we be eating less of?
Well, luckily, they're all really delicious foods and they're really fun to cook with. So the first food group in the MIND diet is berries. And it's the only fruit that Dr. Morris thought had enough evidence behind it to recommend it, that you eat it at least 3 times a week. So
that's
berries,
easy. 3 times a week, easy. Berries? Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah. I actually recommend eating berries every day if you can. But berries have a lot of individual data behind them in terms of improving memory, especially in women who are getting older, improving executive function. Berries in and of itself have a huge amount of data that supports their use in preventing cognitive decline. The second is also a food group that everyone loves, right? Leafy greens. Mm-hmm. And the MIND diet recommends you eat at least 1 cup of leafy greens a day.
Okay.
So that's easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, leafy greens also have their own individual pile of data saying that they prevent cognitive decline. The third food group is vegetables. So unlike the Mediterranean diet, which puts leafy greens and vegetables all lumped together in the same part of the pyramid, in the MIND diet, they separate out leafy greens and vegetables as 2 separate food groups because there's different bioactive substances in each one. And the variety of the types of vegetables and greens that we get is super important for a healthy brain and a healthy microbiome, which we can talk about if we have time.
Oh, that is a whole nother show, my friend.
That's a whole other show. Exactly.
I love the microbiome. I could talk about that all day. So we've got our berries, we have our greens, we have our veggies. I'm happy so far. Keep going.
Beans.
Love them.
So beans is a food group. And beans is one of the food groups that's common to all of the blue zones on Earth, no matter if you're in Costa Rica or Japan. All of these populations of people eat beans. And there's a huge amount of data that shows that beans are probably mostly beneficial because of their fiber content. When you're eating a fiber-rich diet, you're really slowing down the absorption of sugars into your bloodstream. We know there's a correlation between diabetes and Alzheimer's disease. There's also now a correlation between borderline diabetes. That's the people that just score a little bit high in their fasting blood sugar, and Alzheimer's risk. So having beans in the diet is a built-in way to fill you up with lean protein that is fiber-rich. And beans are, of course, delicious and really fun to cook with, too.
And versatile, really versatile.
And versatile. The next food group, this is the 5th one, might surprise some people, and it's whole grains.
Hooray for whole grains.
Yes. And this might also surprise you as well. The recommendation amount of whole grains that you eat in the course of a day is a 1/2 cup cooked about 3 times a day.
Wow. So all these people who say, I can't eat grains are bad, any kind of whole grain. I mean, it can be a gluten-free whole grain, or a whole grain with gluten? I mean, depending, because people on a gluten-free diet, they can still eat plenty of whole grains, right?
That's absolutely right. And one of the things that I teach a lot in my classes is the difference between, the junky white flour, refined carbohydrate type of grains that Americans eat. And the whole grains are actually beneficial for large populations of people and have been for hundreds of years. 98% of what Americans eat, what they would call grains, comes from processed white flour. So we get rid of that in the Brain Health Kitchen. We don't use any processed white flour at all. I do sometimes use wheat flour or a variety of wheat flour that's white wheat that's higher in fiber. But I'm mostly making gluten-free whole grain dishes just because it's more fun, and people probably get enough gluten in their lives unless they're gluten sensitive or celiac. And I think it's important to learn how to cook with these other grains, such as barley, such as oats, such as forbidden rice, wild rice, brown rice. I love farro, which is, of course, a wheat berry, but it's also an unrefined type of wheat. So a lot of people, even if they're gluten sensitive, they can eat farro.
And I will tell my listeners in a few minutes when we're done going through this list, which is an important list, we have to talk about forbidden rice because it is so darn good. So I have to write myself a note because I keep saying, oh, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that. And I know it's going to happen. I know what's going to happen because I didn't have my blueberries today.
I won't let you forget. It's one of my absolute favorite recipes.
I did play with it with a forbidden rice recipe that you had on your website. So we have to talk about that. Okay. It's going on my list of things to talk to you about. Okay. So we're on our whole grains. What else do we want to eat?
Number 6 is olive oil. The Mind Diet recommends that olive oil is your primary cooking oil.
Doable, delicious. Yeah.
So people get really confused about cooking oil. And if you go into the average kitchen, and I do a lot of private classes in people's homes, and I open up their pantry and, oh man, most people have a collection of oil that is just outrageous. And I like to simplify things. You don't need a lot of cooking oils. What you need is olive oil for most of your cooking, avocado oil for high heat cooking because it has a higher smoke point than olive oil. And you have to cook olive oil very gently. You don't want to heat it up too much or else you lose out on some of the healthy polyphenols and some of the delicate fats in it. So use avocado for high heat. And then sometimes I use a blend. Let's say I'm roasting some vegetables in a 400-degree oven. I might mix up a little bit of olive oil for the flavor with the avocado oil to increase the smoke. And you don't really need a whole lot more than that. I like people to get rid of the most brain unfriendly oils. Those would be safflower, a lot of the highly processed sesame oils, sunflower oil. A lot of the oils that are made from seeds are very high in omega-6 fatty acids, which are the most inflammatory ones to blood vessels and brains. And the reason that they're so high in omega-6s is that you have to apply high heat to get the oil out of these seeds. It's not a gentle process like pressing an olive. So if you think about how these oils are made, some canola oils are in that category as well. You really shouldn't be cooking with them at all.
Because, again, too high in omega-6, and we really want the omega-3. And I have a feeling you're going to have seafood in your list that we're about to get to.
That's number 7.
Yay!
Yeah, fish and seafood. So this is really interesting. As you know, the Mediterranean diet recommends eating seafood 2 or 3 times a week. And that's really tough for Americans, especially if you're landlocked in the middle of the country, sort of like I am here in Wyoming. But seafood is, of course, high in omega-3 fatty acids. It's high in vitamin D. It's high in lean protein. There's so many different minerals in seafood that are good for your brain, like selenium and things like that. But the interesting thing about the Mind Diet is they did not find a benefit in terms of reducing Alzheimer's rate even more over 1 seafood meal a week.
Oh, okay. So if you're eating it once a week, you should feel good about that.
You should feel good about that, and you shouldn't beat yourself up if you're not eating tons of seafood, or maybe it's a little pricey where you live and you don't really want to fork out. Sometimes wild salmon can be $18 a pound in my grocery store. And so you really want to feel good about having at least 1 seafood meal a week. You can eat more if you like it. They didn't really find a problem with any toxins or, anything, environmental toxins in the seafood. They just didn't find an increased benefit.
Okay. That's interesting. I love seafood. I'm all for it. Yeah. I mean, so far so good. I'm like, yay, I'm in good shape. I'm doing all the right stuff.
Absolutely. Number 8 is chicken. And up to 4 servings of chicken is part of a brain healthy diet.
And why is that? What's the secret to poultry?
The secret to poultry is in the choline and the lutein, which are 2 very important brain healthy nutrients. that you don't get from a lot of vegetables.
Right.
You get them in eggs.
Yeah.
The Mind diet largely ignores eggs, by the way.
Oh,
When I
that's
asked
mean.
about this, I know, because I have a Q&A with Dr. Morris on my website if anyone's interested in going into more depth. But in her opinion, eggs are just too complicated. There's that whole thing with some people respond to the cholesterol in their diet. They're called hyper-responders, about 25% of the population. So some people can eat as many eggs as they want, and others should really limit them. So she had a hard time making a blanket recommendation for everyone as it pertains to eggs. But eggs are also high in choline and lutein, and also, of course, omega-3s, depending on what the chickens are fed.
Right, right.
Poultry. So as we know, there's poultry and then there's poultry, right? There's chicken that is natural and antibiotic-free and raised without hormones and raised ethically and humanely on places where the animals are allowed to forage. And then there's the chickens that are mostly the byproduct of our industrial system that we want to avoid. And there aren't any studies that tell you which, that one's better than the other, but I think we know what the answer is.
So you prefer that all natural chicken. And, it's interesting because, and I know I've talked about this on the show before, but my mother-in-law lives in England. My husband's British, and she hates the chicken here because it just has no flavor. She's so used to these free-ranging chickens that are nibbling and eating all sorts of different things. And it just makes the chicken taste, I guess, maybe gamier, if you will, for lack of a better word, which
it does.
And so for her palate, she's like, your chicken's too boring. It's interesting.
It's true, but it's also a way you can change your palate and you can change the way you taste things too. I stopped buying chicken mostly at the grocery store, and I source all of my chicken now from a local farmer who raises them that way. And they are a little bit gamey. I usually stew them in a pot or make broth out of them. I roast them in the oven and they're fine, but it's not the big white breasted chicken they're used to seeing at the grocery store. But we really need to get away from thinking that's what chicken is.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the last one?
There's two more.
We're only up to 8. I'm awful at math, by the way. I need to eat more chicken. Go on.
Number 9 is nuts. And I would include seeds in as well.
Love them. Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the studies on nuts are shown to reduce the risk of gaining weight. When you're at midlife, they reduce your risk of diabetes later in life. People that eat nuts have less cardiovascular disease. They have less stroke. They have lower LDL cholesterol in their bloodstream. We know it's a really important part of preventing Alzheimer's. So a lot of my recipes include nut milks, nut creams, lots of innovative ways to cook with nuts and seeds, lots of pestos, lots of chutneys. So you can include these in pretty much, every day in your foods.
Mm-hmm. And is it once a day? Is that the recommendation? Like a handful a day?
About a handful 5 times a week.
Okay.
A handful is about a quarter cup. And it's important not to overdo it. We all know nuts are high in calories.
Mm-hmm.
So the 10th brain healthy food group is the controversial one. It's red wine.
Oh.
So this is really good news if you like to drink red wine.
I like red wine.
Me too.
I do. In moderation. Yeah, in moderation.
So the good news is that red wine is thought to be fortified with flavonols, like we've read about resveratrol. It's part of the culture of Mediterranean countries, and that's complicated, right? It may have to do with more lifestyle than the nutrients in the wine. But the key thing with red wine in the Mind Diet study is they say no more than 5 ounces a day.
So just keep it to a minimum for sure.
That's a small glass.
Yeah.
It's a very small pour. And Dr. Morris was out here recently to do a cooking class with me in Jackson, which was a lot of fun. And she was filling me in on the Mind Diet trial, which is now a randomized placebo-controlled trial that's ongoing with data to come out in 2021. And she said for this trial, they had to drop this as a brain healthy food group. So now red wine is no longer part of the Mind Diet.
Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo.
And the reason, she said for Americans, it's just too complicated to tell a group of people that a little bit of red wine is good, but a lot is bad.
Yeah, that's a hard message to get across. I get that. So give us the list quickly of the foods we should not eat. And then I must ask you about these cooking classes you give because, you said you go to people's homes but I want my listeners to know where you're going to do these classes because it's pretty darn cool. So give us the foods, which probably will not surprise us, that are considered not mind healthy.
I don't think there's any surprises here. There's 5 brain unhealthy food groups. The first one is fast and fried food. And the Mind Diet would like you to have less than a serving a week.
Okay.
That's easy, right?
Easy. So far, so good. Yeah.
Pastries and sweets, less than 5 a week.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that.
We can do it.
This one may not make many of you happy. Butter, less than a tablespoon a day.
Oh, you know what? I personally eat so much olive oil and butter is just not a big part of my diet. So that's for me an easy one. Of course, it's the holidays, everyone's baking, but we're going to do our best.
Well, a lot of what I do is I teach people how to bake with olive oil instead of butter. So there's just a few tricks to that.
Yeah.
Number 4 is cheese, less than an ounce a week.
Oh.
I know.
Oh.
Before you guys all hang up, the reason it's so restrictive on butter and cheese in the MIND diet is that there is a strong association between saturated fat in our diets and our risk of Alzheimer's disease. And that's just really important to know. The Mediterranean diet and the MIND diet are not low-fat diets, mind you. They're as much as 40% fat, but it's all monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats with less than 10% of saturated fat. And those are the fats that your brain loves, that your brain needs for cell membranes and building blocks. So number 5, meat, less than 4 servings a week. And a portion of meat is 3 ounces.
Very doable. I mean, I love beef, and I'm also more like in the grass-fed. I like that flavor better. But I think if people just moderate their beef consumption, but then round it out with all these plant foods we've been talking about, I think that's really doable.
Absolutely. And I try to teach meat more as a condiment than a center of the plate. I like to do innovative things with vegetables so that the vegetable dishes are the sort of the wow factor of the meal. And I've kind of trained my family. My husband and my sons are all meat eaters. Like instead of having 2 pieces of bacon in the morning for breakfast, I'll make 2 pieces of bacon and sprinkle it on their breakfast burritos or whatever. And they're eating so much less meat than they used to, and just trick them into thinking they're having bacon.
Yeah. And there's also the faux bacon. Like people do all sorts of vegan bacons and different. And somebody was just telling me about sausages that are made with figs. So there's cool products out there.
There are. But I also think it's important to source your meat strategically. I favor grass-fed meat over industrially produced meat. It will have a healthier fat profile, meaning more omega-3 fatty acids and less omega-6s. And a lot of the grass-fed farms and ranches treat their animals a lot more humanely, obviously, than the feeding lot animals.
So let me talk about that concussion, because I feel like we went through this list. So now we know our foods to eat. We know our foods to moderate. What did you do when you recently, now you live in a beautiful part of the country. I think you said you were walking your dog, probably on some gorgeous trail somewhere with a mountain in the background. And I'm
exactly where I was.
Sitting here in Boston, freezing to death. I'm like, I'm going to go bundle up and take a walk on the street outside. And you're living in paradise. And then you email me to say, I'm walking my dog. I got a concussion. Can you please tell us what the heck happened to you? And then how did you treat it? What did you eat to heal your brain or to help heal your brain?
Well, I'm still processing this because it happened 8 days ago.
Oh, that is recent. Yeah.
And I feel like I'm doing really, really well. But basically, I have a puppy. Her name is Olive Oil.
Of course.
And we call her Livy.
What do you call her?
Livy.
Livy, even though it's olive oil. I'm trying to think of that. What's the connection?
It's hard to yell olive oil.
Okay.
So we call her Livy.
Okay.
Short for Olive. And then I have another dog named Orzo, who's 6 years old. So I'm walking my dogs, and another dog came and attacked my puppy.
Oh, no.
So Jackson is a beautiful place, but it's also a place where everyone has a couple dogs. And so when it's a beautiful day and people are out hiking, it's, dog jams on the trails. And so I swooped down, my mama instinct kicked in. I swooped down to pick up Livy, and this woman's dog was on a leash, and I think the leash tripped me. So I basically my feet came out from under me. I did a Superman off the trail, and I landed on my head.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Yikes.
and it's not pretty. I'm glad this isn't, a visual.
Yes. Yeah. Audio only.
TV. But I have a black eye and I had a big bruise, and I definitely had mild concussive symptoms. So the first thing I thought about is, I got to beef up on my brain food. And I went through the brain healthy list, and I already eat this way. So it wasn't difficult, but I found that I wasn't very hungry either because I was in a lot of pain. So I ate whole grain toast in the morning with almond butter on top and a little bit of honey and a little bit of salt. I drank a lot of water. I didn't drink any alcohol at all. That's not good for a brain that's healing from some sort of trauma. I ate a lot of berries, mind you. I was making berry smoothies, and I was eating berries by the scoopful with yogurt. And my friends brought me soup. I had lots of delicious meals brought to me. My husband, by the way, I just dropped him off the airport, so he was out of the country. And I took a few supplements too. I'm not a huge believer in supplements because when getting back to Alzheimer's prevention, there really is no data to support taking a supplement or a vitamin of any sort prevents dementia. And there's some caveats to that. Like if you're low in vitamin D, you should definitely have enough vitamin D in your system. There are some associations with dementia and vitamin D levels that are low. But the whole omega-3 fish oil situation is very up in the air. Most studies show no benefit. A lot of studies show some benefit. That's always been a quagmire. But for trauma and for recovering from a brain injury, there are a lot of papers that do support using fish oil and omega-3s. So that's what I did. And based on your recommendation, because we were emailing to reschedule, I started taking 4 grams of omega-3s a day. And I took resveratrol pills, vitamin D pills, because I wasn't really getting outside that much as usual. And I took anti-inflammatories around the clock just to reduce the inflammation.
Yeah, good for you. You know, years ago when Simon, my younger one, got a concussion, I put this, and it might have been his second, because, the kids played soccer and, you get concussions from soccer. I was frantic, as moms are, we get frantic when our kids get injured. I put out this plea on Twitter. I said, anybody out there know anything about concussions and diet, the connection? And lo and behold, I get this tweet back from a dietitian who works for the Detroit Red Wings, literally works for their hockey team. And she told me, we set up a call, that her players are taking, I forget if it was like 4 grams or so of, or maybe even more, take a lot of omega-3 supplements every single day, just as a preventative. And then if they get a concussion, something like 10 grams. I mean, really high. So they just, maybe it is 4 grams, just preventatively, just to keep their brains boosted. So, out there, the athletes are using it. I know in the military, they're using omega-3 for traumatic brain injury. So there's definitely science out there. And hopefully that helped you, because 8 days later, here we are on our phone call.
I feel great.
Good.
I woke up without a headache yesterday and I'm just feeling really good. The other thing about Alzheimer's and omega-3s is there will be a study forthcoming, I'm sure of it, because Alzheimer's is such a hot area of research now. So even though we don't have data that proves that taking omega-3s prevents Alzheimer's, we don't really know how it affects individual people when they're studying large populations. So let's say that you're a vegan and maybe you need to be really careful about getting enough omega-3s because you're not eating seafood, you're not eating some of the other omega-rich foods that come from animal products. Then I would consider supplementing if I was in that situation. So these population data studies don't always pertain to the individual.
Okay. And what about kids? We've been talking about preventing Alzheimer's. Would you recommend that everybody listening who might have little kids at home, no one's thinking about Alzheimer's when you have a 5-year-old and you're trying to get them to sit down to dinner. So do you think that everybody should be eating the Mind diet? Because it's a lifetime thing. It's not just something you say in your 40s, I better start improving my diet so I don't get Alzheimer's.
I do. I'm not an expert in nutrition like you are, but I do have some opinions about feeding kids from being a mom and being interested in this field. I know that up until about the age of 21, kids can eat more saturated fat than we should in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, because their brains are still growing and they need a lot of different types of fat in their diets. But what I am adamant about with kids of all ages is they should not be given a steady diet of sugar. There's so much data that says that the sugar in the drinks that we give kids and everything, the sugar that's added in all of the processed foods, the sugar that we cook with, all the sweets that are just a constant stream of sugar, these are detrimental to our metabolisms and also detrimental to our brains in the long run.
So cutting back on that sugar and then eating a healthy diet. I mean, I think everything we talked about is so doable. And it's not like you have to go to some weird supermarket, to find some product. But I will tell you, so you don't really have to, go to any specialty store or find anything weird. Like everything we've talked about is something you find at the supermarket. It's so doable. But there is one food you mentioned, forbidden rice. And I did find it at Whole Foods, but not in the bulk bin. I found it in one of these packages where you kind of microwave it and it's sort of pre-cooked, like a couple minutes in the microwave. It was so good. But forbidden rice is black rice. And I want you to tell everybody why you like forbidden rice. And then I'm going to tell everybody about a recipe I found on your website. I kind of played with it a little bit because, when you have certain things in your house, you just kind of use them up. But absolutely. I played with this salad this forbidden rice salad that is awesome. That's on your website. But what is forbidden rice and why do you like it as a brain healthy food?
Well, the main reason I love it is because it's so delicious. It cooks up really easily, just like white rice in a 2-to-1 ratio. And it's got this beautiful dark blue, dark black pigment that turns purplish after it's cooked. And the reason it's purple is because the rice is teeming with the same phytonutrient that makes blueberries so good for us. It's a compound called anthocyanins. And anthocyanins have been studied in animals and also in humans to reduce amyloid plaque formation in the brain. Amyloid plaque is what builds up over our lives that leads to a tipping point that becomes overt Alzheimer's disease. So anything that will scrub the amyloid from our brain or prevent it from getting laid down is foods that we want to eat. And a lot of the foods in nature that are dark purple and red are filled with anthocyanins. So I love this purple black rice. And it's also easy to cook. It's chewy. It's got a nutty flavor. I love the way it smells. And it's very amenable to making a rice salad, like my forbidden rice salad, which all my cooking school students absolutely love, because it can be served warm, it can be served hot, and it can be served cold. It's good as leftovers. I usually make a big batch of forbidden rice in my rice cooker or my Instant Pot, and then I'll portion it out into small bags or small containers. And I like to heat it up in the morning in the microwave with some almond milk and some honey and some blueberries for a breakfast porridge.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we don't think about rice, at breakfast. And where do you find your forbidden rice?
I find it at my grocery store. And because I live in a fairly small community, I figure if I can find it in my grocery store in Jackson Hole, you guys can probably find it where you live. But don't be confused. It's not wild rice. Like if you go to the bulk bins and you just find a black rice, it's probably going to be wild rice. Wild rice is also good for you. It's got lots of pigments, lots of different pigments, but it's not the same as forbidden rice.
Okay. And, I remember years ago, my friend Deanna, she's Chinese, that's her heritage, and she shops at a place called H Mart. It's a big Asian supermarket. And I remember she brought me years ago this forbidden rice, and I didn't do anything with it, which was silly. And of course now, thank you, World Wide Web, we could just go in and Google, and of course people can go to your website. But what I did was with that salad, I got these packages or pouches of microwavable forbidden rice. So I cooked up 2 of those pouches, and that came to 3 cups. It's just myself and Tim most of the time because Simon's in college, Josh is in New York. So, we're empty nesters. So I cook up the rice. I have the 3 cups. And then you call for adding lemon juice. That's easy. Extra virgin olive oil, chickpeas, open up a can, drain and rinse. A green onion, couple green onions, slice them up. Green onions are easy. Dates, chopped dates. And chopped dates, by the way, folks, dates in general, have no added sugar. It's just dried fruit, right? Dates are great. Pitted, buy them pitted, chop them up. It called for pistachios. I always have pistachios in my house. And I buy the ones that are already shelled, and they're so good. I just love them. And then cinnamon. I'm saying cinnamon because you call for cinnamon and cardamom and cinnamon. And I am not a huge cardamom fan, so I left it out, but that's what cooking's all about. I just added the cinnamon and then cilantro, which I love. And if you hate cilantro, which half of you do, just add parsley and then kosher salt and pepper to taste. It was beyond delicious. You've got this lovely lemony olive oil combo. You've got the sweetness from the dates, all these great textures, right? The crunch from the nuts and the chewiness.
And you're checking off your boxes for your brain healthy food groups.
I loved it.
Love that you tinkered with it, because all of my recipes are meant to be tinkered with. They're meant to be, here you are, it's a Wednesday night and you're trying to pull something together for dinner and you look in the cupboard and see what you have, or you might not like cardamom, like you said. So all of this recipe especially is really good with brown rice. It's really good with quinoa. It's good with farro. It actually started out as a farro recipe that I riffed on. So this is sort of a master recipe for any type of grain salad.
Good, a good baseline. And I love that you're giving people this permission, which I do too, to take a recipe, play with it, and make it your own. And you can certainly top this with any protein. right? You can add some chicken to this or salmon, whatever you
Lovely
even
with salmon.
that lean steak, because you're having it just I have steak maybe once a week or once a month. I don't eat it all the time, but that would be great on that.
Yeah. Sometimes I like to make these little lamb meatballs that have the same type of Moroccan style spices. And these lamb meatballs are also really good with the salad.
Yum. I would love that. I had Matt Jennings on my podcast a year ago, and he has in his cookbook homegrown these lamb meatballs that are so good. And I had made them for Simon when he was coming home last Christmas for the break. And that's when he announced he was not eating meat anymore. I'm like, you will be eating the meat because I have been cooking all week in preparation for you coming home. So you will take a break from not eating meat and enjoy these meatballs. And they were really good. So you do cooking classes, and where do you do your cooking classes? Because it's not just out there in Wyoming, although I think you do. I think I might have to come out to Wyoming. That's what I need to do. Tell everybody about your cooking classes and where you do them, because you're all over the place.
I am all over the place. It's a good thing my kids are in college, right?
Yeah.
And I would love for you to come to Jackson, Liz. I have done these classes everywhere. They started as a program through my local hospital called BrainWorks. And I got together with a cognitive health specialist here, who's an internal medicine doctor specializing in dementia prevention and dementia treatment. And we put together a program called BrainWorks, which is a 7-day dementia prevention program for the community. So my cooking school kind of spinned out of these BrainWorks sessions we were doing for the community. And to date, we've had about 800 people in our community go through BrainWorks, which is really remarkable. And these are our ambassadors for brain health who are telling all their friends about it, which is even better. So I've taught in churches, I've taught in schools, I've taught in private homes. I often get invited to go either speak or teach classes or both at other places. I love going to places where there's a cooking school. I do a regular visit as the visiting chef at Rancho La Puerta, which is a wellness destination in Tecate, Mexico. I do that a couple times a year where I stay for 7 days. I give 2 talks about Alzheimer's disease and prevention, and I give 3 sit-down cooking classes. They're all hands-on. We have a family-style dinner afterwards. So that's really fun. They also have a 7-acre organic garden that they planted in the 40s. It's one of the most beautiful gardens I've ever seen. And it's the most established garden in North America that's purely organic. So it's really a pleasure to go there and pick the produce from the garden and go into the kitchen and create these amazing foods. I also cook in Tuscany as part of a wellness retreat at a place called Monteverde. It's a hilltop town, like one hilltop town over from Montalcino, kind of close to Siena in the Tuscany region. It's an absolutely gorgeous area of Italy. And the Culinary Academy there has a cooking school and a garden, and I collaborate with the chef there as part of a wellness retreat with other physicians and dietitians and healthcare professionals. And I do that usually in the fall. I just got back from being there in September.
How wonderful. And I actually think I want to be your personal assistant. Will you hire me? Can I be your PA?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I actually have taught at the culinary school out there at Rancho La Puerta many years ago.
Yes, you have.
I have, and it's a beautiful place, and I would love to go back there. And of course, who doesn't want to go to Tuscany? That's just such a great experience. So anybody can sign up to go. I mean, it's a big deal, obviously. It's not like, you're just, going down the road to shop at the Stop and Shop. I mean, it's a big trip.
Yeah, these are destination trips. These are trips where you invest in your wellness and you want to learn something that's really going to help you for the rest of your life. I don't know if I mentioned it, but the latest thinking about Alzheimer's is not that, you get Alzheimer's when you get older. We think that Alzheimer's is a process that starts 20 to 30 years before the first symptom, like the first memory lapse, the first, change in your cognitive function happens. So for most of us, and this depends on your genetic predisposition, some people may have a genetic mutation for Alzheimer's or a strong family history, and this process might be happening even earlier. But we have decades of this brain health where we really need to take care of our brains so that we don't get Alzheimer's later. And so if you're looking for a destination vacation, I think taking care of your brain is a great thing to learn.
You're taking care of your brain, but you're also having a good time and you're on vacation.
Oh, absolutely. It's so fun.
You mentioned sort of our genetic predisposition. So some people are genetically more predisposed. Like my dad has Lewy body dementia. He's 89. He's had it for maybe 5 years. It's like an 8-year ordeal. It's awful. And I think it's the second most common form of dementia next to Alzheimer's, but people don't really talk about Lewy body. It's what Robin Williams had. And I don't, is there any research on Lewy body dementia, or is all the data just on Alzheimer's?
There's more and more data on all types of dementia just because it's becoming a huge public health problem. Given the aging of our population and the sheer numbers of people entering age groups where they're at risk for different types of dementia. When it comes to Lewy body, it's definitely getting more attention since Robin Williams was diagnosed with it, but it still seems to be a little bit of an orphan disease where there's not a lot of huge studies going on about it, especially when it comes to nutrition. But the most interesting thing I've learned about Lewy body lately is that Lewy body is often a mixed dementia with Alzheimer's, more so than they used to think. So they used to think there was this pure Lewy body, which is not as common now as the mixed portion. So if you can do all these other things that we're learning about preventing Alzheimer's, it may slow down Lewy body mixed dementia as well.
And what does that mean, mixed dementia?
For example, Alzheimer's is the most common type of dementia. 80% of all dementias are Alzheimer's, but 50% of Alzheimer's disease also has a very strong component of vascular disease. This means little strokes happening in the brain, unhealthy blood vessels, atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries as it pertains to the brain that reduces blood flow and perfusion to the brain. It's a mixed picture. It's like cardiovascular disease plus Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's is tangles and plaques and other types of inflammatory processes that happen in the brain. So they don't really know this until they did a big study and looked at the autopsies of people who had Alzheimer's, or they thought they just had Alzheimer's, and half of them had vascular dementia too.
So many things happening, multifaceted. Yeah.
So your listeners already know a lot of these strategies to prevent Alzheimer's just based on what we've been talking about for decades about reducing cardiovascular disease. All of those things are pertinent. All the things that you do to prevent yourself from getting a heart attack or a stroke will also keep you from getting Alzheimer's.
Yeah. So you're writing a cookbook? Like, you're going to give us a cookbook? We want more than just your website, right? Is that in the works at any point?
I would love to write a cookbook. I'm collecting my recipes. I have hundreds of them. I'm constantly trying to make them easier, ingredients more accessible, and the cooking more streamlined, and all of those things. But I've got a few hundred recipes that I'm sitting on, and I'm starting to organize them. And yes, I would love to write a cookbook. Mostly because I think people need to know how to cook and eat better. And there's lots of things out there and lots of resources, but the brain health, cooking and eating is becoming a very specific thing that is a specialized knowledge. And I think it can be a little difficult to find out what the real story is on that.
So tell everybody, what's your website called? And which of course I shared in the intro, but what's your website called and what can people find when they stop by?
My website is brainhealthkitchen.com. And I'm not selling anything on my website. It's all information that is free. I write articles about the science behind Alzheimer's, what's happening in brain health news. And of course, it's sort of like a recipe blog too. There's dozens and dozens of recipes that you can make at home, like the Moroccan forbidden rice salad and so many other ones using the brain healthy food groups. I'm also over on Instagram at Brain Health Kitchen. And I love Instagram. I have a lot of friends over there. I've made some great connections. So you'll see me in my stories when I'm testing out recipes in the kitchen or walking my dogs, hopefully without mishaps. Mm-hmm. I'm on Facebook sometimes, not so much as I used to be, but I still do have a little presence there. And your readers can contact me through my website. They can contact me with a direct message through Instagram, or they can email me at brainhealthkitchen@gmail.com.
And I will tell everybody to follow you on Instagram because your Instagram stories are gorgeous because A, you get to go to cool places like Italy, but you also live in such a beautiful part of the country. And it's just such a pleasure to see the mountains. I'm like, oh, I wish I was there.
Oh, thank you. It's so fun. So my favorite way to reach out to my readers and anyone who's interested in brain health is with my newsletter. And it's a monthly email that just sort of is a roundup of the recipes I'm working on, what I've been up to. When I have a class coming up, I'll announce it there first. And sometimes I even put some recipes there that are just exclusive for my newsletter subscribers. I do book giveaways. I have a couple really great book giveaways coming up. So to subscribe to the newsletter, which is also just free, you can do that through my website as well.
And the classes that you do in Wyoming, is that once a year that you do that?
Well, I do classes all the time, and I do it fairly ad hoc. If someone is visiting Jackson and they get a hold of me and say they want to come in and do a class, then we'll get together and figure out where we want to do it, either my house or yours, or if it's a big group, I can rent a commercial kitchen.
Very cool. Okay. This is all good to know. Well, don't be surprised if you see me at Rancho La Puerta. And I promise if I'm there, I'm not stalking you. I will let you know ahead of time. You'll be like, why is she here? Wait a minute. This is creepy.
You should go. I'm going the first week in March. That's a perfect time to go.
Wait a second. Are you serious? Because no, I'm not going that week, but you're like, wait a minute, did you? No, I said to my husband, I cannot stand Boston because it's so like cloudy and dreary here and I need sunshine. So this winter I've got to get away. And I said, we got to go somewhere in March. I don't know if I could bring him though. He might not go for it. Hey, anybody listening, come with me.
I brought my husband.
I think he'd love it. I mean, I've been there twice and it's spectacular.
He left on the third day to go get tacos, but that's okay.
He left the campus. He's like, I got to get out of here. Annie, I have one more question. I could actually talk to you all day, but I know you're recovering from your concussion and I know you've got another call, but I always ask people a little mystery question at the end of the show. I call it the mason jar question. I want to pull it out. And my question to you is this, and this is totally me. Okay. Do you have a sweet tooth? And if so, because you've just poo-pooed sugar, lady, do you have a sweet tooth? And if so, how do you satisfy it in a healthy way?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I have a sweet tooth. So my dad was from Sicily and I have that Sicilian gene for sweets. So I adore sweets. And so since I've become ambassador for a brain healthy lifestyle, I've completely changed the way I eat sweets and the way I cook desserts, but I have some really great ideas for sweets. So one of my favorite things to do is make a rustic marmalade cake. And this recipe is on my website. And one of my axioms of baking, and I use olive oil instead of butter, is that you should use natural sweeteners instead of refined sweeteners. So there's a little bit of coconut palm sugar in this cake, but it's mostly dates that sweeten it. And dates are high in fiber and they're a natural form of sugar. So having fiber in the mix reduces the absorption of the sugar. I also avoid saturated fat in my baking, and I use a lot of citrus and a lot of nuts. So this is a cake that's made with olive oil and almond flour and dates. And what you do is you take a whole lemon and a whole orange, organic please, because we're going to eat the rind, and you boil it in water until it gets soft. This takes about 30 minutes. And then you pulse these fruits in the food processor until they turn into something that looks like marmalade, hence the name marmalade cake. Then you add your olive oil and your almond flour and everything else, and you bake it in the oven, and it smells amazing when it comes out of the oven. And it's also very nutrient dense and fiber dense and not too sweet. So a small piece really satisfies.
Oh, it sounds so good.
We have to talk about chocolate if we have time, because
I have time. Do you have time? I told you I could talk to you all day. Talk to me about chocolate. Yes.
If the Mind Diet food groups were like Annie's food groups, I definitely would have number 11 would be dark chocolate. There's not super strong, large data that shows this prevents Alzheimer's disease, but there's so much other scientific information about how dark chocolate, and that means a cacao content of more than 70%, contains flavonols, which are phytonutrients that really help keep your blood vessels healthy, and they improve blood flow to the brain, and they reduce inflammation in the brain. So chocolate is something you can definitely have in your diet, but you don't want to eat chocolate with a lot of other junk with it. So I have a brownie recipe on my website. It's called Tahini Swirled Brownie Bites. And these are my new favorite brownies. I've had dozens of brownies recipes that I've fallen in love with over the years, but this is my current favorite. It's sweetened with applesauce. It's sweetened with maple syrup, which provides us a lot of selenium, magnesium, zinc, some calcium. It's made with olive oil instead of butter. And I swirl tahini in the top, reminiscent of when I used to put peanut butter on my kids' brownies when they were little as a special treat. And I call them brownie bites because you don't want to eat a big brownie. You want to have a little brownie, but these are nutrient dense, also fiber rich treats that will really satisfy even a small amount.
Yum. And tahini is made from ground sesame seeds, in case people don't know that. And is there flour in there? Any grain or almond flour? What are you using?
There's almond flour.
So gluten-free.
They're gluten-free.
Are you gluten-free? Do you eat gluten-free?
Oh, no, I eat everything.
Okay.
Yeah. I call myself a flexitarian, but I'm not gluten sensitive in the least. But I abhor, refined forms of gluten. I don't use any white flour anymore in my kitchen.
It's good. I abhor it. This is good. I think on that note, I abhor it. Well, I really loved having you on the show. And I feel like it could have been a two-parter. Maybe I'll have you back on because there's so much food we could talk about. But your website's a great resource for people because it's chock full of great recipes. And oh my gosh, yeah, we could definitely talk all day. It's amazing. And I'm just so glad that all this healthy eating really does have a positive impact on so many aspects of our health, including our brains.
It really does. There was one study, I'll just leave you with one more study that came out in July. I don't know if it made the news and everyone's aware of it, but this came out in the Journal of the American Medical Association in July of this year. And they looked at if people could follow 4 out of 5 brain healthy lifestyle factors, then they can reduce 60% of their Alzheimer's risk. And brain healthy diet was the number one lifestyle factor that they should pay attention to. And the other thing about this study that's really interesting and really amazing for people with a family history is that they were able to reduce 30% of the Alzheimer's in those who had a family history and a genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's.
Ooh, hopeful, really hopeful.
Very hopeful.
And we didn't talk about exercise, but I know that exercise is also important. So we're going to give a plug for exercise, keeping physically active.
150 minutes a week is what's recommended for Alzheimer's prevention.
Does yoga count?
Absolutely.
Thank
and there's
you.
Good studies about resistance training, especially gentle resistance training like yoga that doesn't cause a lot of inflammation in your body. 2 sessions of resistance training a week is thought to be very important for Alzheimer's prevention too.
Phew. I love my yoga. I love my yoga.
Keep doing it.
Well, Annie, I might see you at Rancho La Puerta because now you have put the bug in my ear about that because I need the sunshine and I know I will get it.
I'll be there in November too.
November of 2020.
Of 2020.
I mean, we're kind of in November now, entering December. So November of 2020, but Rancho La Puerta, March 2020. Ooh. All right. I promise if I'm there, I'm not stalking you. I'm just there.
I would love to see you there.
I will help you in the kitchen. I will be your assistant.
Amazing.
I will dice. I will slice. Well, Annie Fenn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Liz. This was really fun.
And I'm so glad, everybody listening, that Annie was on the show because we tried so hard. She had a cold. I had a cold. She got the concussion. But it was just great finally getting her on the show. And we do need to get her back. And I do hope you enjoyed the show. And if you do love the show, feel free to post a review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Tell a friend about it. Have a great, healthy day, everybody. And as always, thanks for listening to Liz's Healthy Table.